My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be signing over my 4-bedroom colonial house to my neighbor instead of my only son. The look on Michael's face when he arrived to find Carlos and his family moving into what he assumed would be his inheritance was priceless. Just 1 year earlier, he'd stood in my kitchen and called me a burden, suggesting I should move to a nursing home so he could have the house. But what Michael didn't know was that his cruel words would set in motion a series of events that would not only change my life, but reveal who truly deserved to call this place home. Before I tell you exactly what happened that spring morning when the moving trucks arrived, let me take you back to where it all began. The morning of the house transfer was one I'll never forget. Michael pulled up in his BMW, expecting to discuss next steps for what he assumed was his pending inheritance. Instead, he found Carlos directing movers as they carefully carried furniture into the house where Michael had grown up. The confusion on his face quickly morphed into rage as he spotted me on the porch, holding the official deed transfer papers I'd signed months earlier. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice carrying across the manicured lawn I'd tended for 40 years. I simply smiled and handed him a copy of the legal documents. "I'm giving the house to someone who actually cares about it, and me," I said calmly. "But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how a mother could make such a drastic decision, you need to know the whole story. It wasn't just one moment of cruelty that led me here. It was years of being treated like an inconvenience, a problem to be solved. And it took losing almost everything to realize that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who shows up when you need them most. So let me start from the beginning. From when I first started noticing that my son saw me not as his mother, who sacrificed everything for him, but as an obstacle to his perfect life. Before I continue, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let me know if you've ever felt invisible to someone you love. And if you've ever had to make a difficult decision about family versus fairness, please hit that like button. Your support means the world to me, and sharing our stories helps us all feel less alone in our struggles. I know many of you watching are grandparents, parents, or adult children yourselves. Maybe you're dealing with difficult family dynamics right now. Perhaps you're wondering how relationships that once seemed unbreakable can become so strained. Or maybe you're fortunate enough to have loving, supportive children, and you're watching this thinking, how could this happen? Well, I used to be just like you. I used to believe that if you raised your children right, if you loved them enough, if you sacrificed enough, they would naturally love and respect you in return. I was wrong. The truth is, sometimes the people we pour our hearts into become the very ones who break them. Sometimes the children we nurture grow up to see us not as the foundation of their lives, but as relics of a past they'd rather forget. And sometimes, just sometimes, the neighbors who check on us, the friends who remember our birthdays, the strangers who become our support system, turn out to be more precious than blood relatives. What I'm about to share isn't easy for me. There's shame in admitting your own child doesn't value you. There's heartbreak in acknowledging that the baby you once rocked to sleep now sees you as nothing more than a future inheritance. But there's also power in recognizing your worth and refusing to be diminished by someone else's greed. There's strength in choosing to surround yourself with people who see your value, not your net worth. And there's unexpected joy in discovering that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we build ourselves, one act of kindness at a time. So settle in, grab a cup of tea if you'd like, and let me tell you how I went from being a devoted mother to a discarded inconvenience, and finally to a woman who learned that giving away everything I owned was the only way to truly gain what I needed most: respect, love, and a family that chose me. I've lived in the same house in Maplewood, Ohio for 42 years. It's a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial on Elm Street, with original hardwood floors, a wraparound porch, and a garden that's been featured in the local newspaper 3 times. My late husband, George, and I bought it in 1982 when houses in this neighborhood were still affordable for a teacher and a postal worker. We raised our only son, Michael, in this house. Every measurement mark on the kitchen door frame, every scuff on the stairs tells the story of our family. George passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. One day he was fixing the fence. The next day he was gone. We'd been married for 43 years, and suddenly I was alone in a house full of memories. But I wasn't really alone. I had Michael, or so I thought. He lived just 20 minutes away in a modern townhouse, working as a financial advisor downtown. He'd married Jennifer 8 years ago, a woman who always seemed to be checking her phone whenever she visited, and who had a peculiar way of examining my possessions, like she was mentally cataloging their resale value. After George died, Michael was attentive for about a month. He helped with the funeral arrangements, dealt with the insurance paperwork, and even stayed with me for a few days. But once the immediate crisis passed, his visits became less frequent. Weekly visits turned into monthly phone calls. Monthly phone calls turned into text messages on holidays. I told myself he was busy. Jennifer was pushing for a promotion at her marketing firm. They were trying to have a baby. They had their own lives to live. I'd even met Jennifer's mother, Patricia, at their wedding. A kind woman who'd pulled me aside to say how lucky Michael was to have such a devoted mother. Meanwhile, life on Elm Street continued. The Ramirez family moved in next door about 3 years ago. Carlos worked construction, his wife Maria was a nurse, and they had 2 teenagers, Sophia and Carlos Jr. From the beginning, they were different from the young families who usually kept to themselves. Maria would wave from her garden. Carlos offered to help when he saw me struggling with the lawnmower. The kids would shovel my driveway in winter without being asked, always refusing payment. The changes in Michael's behavior didn't happen overnight. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing away stone. First, it was the canceled Sunday dinners. Sorry, Mom. Jennifer has a work thing. Then it was forgetting my birthday. Not just the celebration, but the day itself. No call, no card, nothing, until I mentioned it a week later and received a hurried apology and an Amazon gift card via email. The man who once made me hand-painted Mother's Day cards now couldn't be bothered to pick up the phone. Every interaction became transactional. When he did visit, usually every 2 or 3 months, it wasn't to see me. It was to inspect the property. He'd walk through rooms making mental notes. Mom, this wallpaper is really dated. Have you thought about updating the kitchen? The property value would increase significantly if you renovated the master bathroom. He never asked how I was managing a loan. Never noticed the arthritis that made opening jars difficult. Never saw that I'd started using George's old cane on bad days. The contrast with the Ramirez family became increasingly stark. While my son calculated property values, Carlos noticed when my garbage cans weren't at the curb and would quietly wheel them out for me. While Michael suggested I was too old to maintain the garden, Maria would share her tomato seedlings and compliment my roses. While Jennifer scrolled through her phone during their rare visits, Sophia would sit on my porch and ask about the photographs in my living room, genuinely interested in stories about George. I remember one particular Sunday when this difference became undeniable. Michael had promised to come for lunch. I'd made his favorite pot roast, the one his grandmother taught me. He texted at the last minute. Can't make it. Open house at the country club. I sat at my dining table, looking at the full spread I'd prepared, fighting back tears. That's when I heard a knock. Maria stood at my door with Sophia. We noticed Michael's car isn't here, she said gently. Would you like some company? We ate together that afternoon, and Sophia asked for the recipe. It was the best Sunday I'd had in months. If the Ramirez family was a bright spot in my increasingly lonely life, My dear friend Helen was my lifeline. Helen and I had been friends for over 30 years. We met at a library book club when our children were young. Unlike me, Helen had 3 daughters who visited regularly, called daily, and included her in every aspect of their lives. But Helen never made me feel bad about Michael's absence. Instead, she became my voice of reason and my source of strength. Every Wednesday, Helen and I met for coffee at the small cafe downtown. She was the only person I could be completely honest with about Michael. "He wants me to downsize," I told her one afternoon, stirring my coffee absently. "He says the house is too big for one person. But Helen, it's not just a house. It's my home. George is in every corner of it." Helen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then you stay put," she said firmly. "Don't you let anyone, not even your son, push you out of your home." Helen had a way of seeing things clearly. When I made excuses for Michael, "He's busy, he's stressed, he's trying for a baby," she would gently challenge me. "Margaret, being busy isn't an excuse for being unkind. Stress doesn't justify neglect. And trying to have a child of his own should make him more appreciative of his mother, not less." She was right, of course, but it's hard to accept that your child might not be the person you thought you raised. It was Helen who first pointed out how special the Ramirez family's kindness was. "Do you realize," she said one day, "that Carlos has fixed more things around your house in the past year than Michael has in the past 5? That Maria checks on you more than your own daughter-in-law? That their teenagers show you more respect than your grown son?" I hadn't wanted to make the comparison, but once Helen said it, I couldn't unsee it. The family next door, who owed me nothing, gave me more care and consideration than the son I'd given everything. Helen also introduced me to the concept of chosen family through her church's program where older members were adopted by younger families. "Love isn't obligation, Margaret," she explained. "It's choice." The day everything changed was a Thursday in March. Michael had called the night before, saying he needed to discuss something important. I'd foolishly hoped maybe he was going to tell me Jennifer was pregnant, that I'd finally be a grandmother. I prepared his favorite coffee cake, set out the good china, and waited by the window like I used to when he was young, watching for his car. He arrived 40 minutes late, no apology, Jennifer conspicuously absent. He didn't even let me serve the coffee cake. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework, where we'd celebrated his college acceptance, where George had taught him chess, and pulled out a folder. "Mom, we need to talk about your living situation," he began, not meeting my eyes. "This house is too much for you. You're getting older, and frankly, it's becoming a burden on everyone." I felt the word like a physical blow. "A burden?" I whispered. "Michael, I've never asked you for anything. I maintain this house myself. I pay my own bills. How am I a burden?" He sighed impatiently, the way he used to when I didn't understand his math homework quickly enough. "It's not about now. It's about planning for the future. Jennifer and I have found several nice assisted living facilities. The sale of this house would more than cover the costs." That's when I understood. This wasn't about my well-being. It was about the house. My home had become nothing more than dollar signs to him. "And what happens to the house if I move to one of these facilities?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Well, Jennifer and I would move in. It's perfect for raising a family, much better than our townhouse." He said it so matter-of-factly, as if it was already decided. When I protested, pointing out that I was managing fine, his face hardened. "Mom, you're being selfish. You're one person rattling around in 4 bedrooms. And honestly, watching you struggle to keep up with this place, it's becoming a burden. You're becoming a burden." There it was, stated plainly. After everything, I had been reduced to an inconvenient obstacle between my son and his inheritance. After Michael left that day, I sat in my kitchen for hours. The coffee cake remained untouched, a symbol of all the gestures of love he no longer valued. I was devastated, but more than that, I was angry. How dare he look at me and see not his mother, but a problem to be solved? How dare he look at my home and see not the backdrop of his childhood, but a real estate opportunity? The initial hurt began to crystallize into something harder, something that felt like determination. That evening, Carlos knocked on my door. He'd noticed Michael's car earlier and, knowing how rare his visits were, wanted to check if everything was okay. One look at my face and he knew it wasn't. "Mrs. Thompson, what's wrong?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. I found myself telling him everything. Michael's demands, the assisted living facilities, being called a burden. Carlos listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each word. "That's not right," he said simply when I finished. "A mother is never a burden. In my culture, taking care of our parents is an honor, not an obligation." He paused, then added, "You know, Maria and I, we've been blessed by having you as our neighbor. Sophia talks about you all the time, how you're teaching her to garden, how you tell her stories. Carlos Jr. says you're the only adult who actually listens when he talks. You're not a burden, Mrs. Thompson. You're a gift." That night, I made a decision. I would not be pushed out of my home. I would not be made to feel worthless by someone who should value me most. But more importantly, I would not leave my most precious possession to someone who saw it only as a financial asset. Michael wanted the house. He would have to earn it by showing he deserved it. And if he couldn't do that, perhaps it was time to consider that family isn't just about DNA. I called Helen first thing the next morning. "I need the name of that lawyer you used for your will," I said. Helen didn't ask questions. She simply gave me the information and added, "Good for you, Margaret. It's about time you stopped letting that boy walk all over you." The next few months were some of the hardest of my life, but also the most enlightening. I met with the lawyer, Mr. Patterson, and began exploring my options. Ohio law, he explained, allowed me to leave my property to anyone I chose. I didn't have to give Michael a reason, and I didn't owe him an inheritance. The house was mine, bought and paid for with George's and my sweat and sacrifice. I could do with it as I pleased. Meanwhile, Michael's behavior worsened. Having shown his true colors, he apparently saw no need to maintain even a pretense of care. He started sending me listings for assisted living facilities via email with subject lines like, "For your consideration," and "Thinking of your future." He had Jennifer call to schedule tours, which I politely but firmly declined. When that didn't work, he tried a different tactic, sudden concern about my health and safety. "Mom, what if you fall?" he'd text. "What if you have a medical emergency?" Never mind that I wore a medical alert device Helen had helped me set up. Never mind that the Ramirez family had a spare key and checked on me regularly. During this time, the contrast between Michael's treatment and the Ramirez family's kindness became even more pronounced. When my arthritis flared up and I couldn't manage the garden, Maria and Sophia spent their Saturday helping me tend to it. When the roof needed minor repairs, Carlos fixed it and refused payment, saying, "That's what neighbors do." When I had cataract surgery, it was Maria who drove me to appointments, while Michael sent a text saying he hoped it went well. The lowest point came in July. I'd had a small fall, nothing serious, just a missed step that left me with a bruised hip. Carlos had seen it happen, and he and Maria insisted on taking me to urgent care. While there, Maria called Michael from my phone to let him know. His response? "Is she okay enough to stay in the house, or is this finally going to convince her she needs professional care?" Maria's face told me everything about how appalled she was. That's when I knew. I had to act. My son saw my minor injury not with concern, but with opportunity. It was time to ensure my home went to people who saw its true value, as a place of love, not a commodity. As summer turned to fall, something beautiful began happening. Without realizing it, I'd built a support network that had nothing to do with blood relations. Helen had always been there, but now the Ramirez family had become integral to my daily life. Sophia came over twice a week after school, ostensibly for help with English homework, but really, I think, because she enjoyed our conversations. She'd tell me about her dreams of becoming a teacher, about school dramas, about her fears of not being smart enough for college. "You're brilliant," I told her one afternoon as we sat on the porch. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." She hugged me then and said, "I wish you were my real grandma." I had to blink back tears as I replied, "In all the ways that matter, sweetheart, I am." Carlos Jr., quiet like his father, had started mowing my lawn without being asked, always refusing payment. When I insisted, he said, "You helped me with that history report about the Great Depression. I got an A because of you. This is just paying it back." Even my other neighbors began rallying around me. Word had spread about Michael's pressure tactics. Mrs. Chen from across the street started bringing me soup every Sunday. "My daughter lives in California," she said. "I know how it feels." Tom and David, the couple 3 houses down, included me in their weekly dinner parties. "Margaret, you're the heart of this neighborhood," David told me. "We're not letting anyone push you out." Mr. Patterson, my lawyer, became more than just legal counsel. As we worked through the paperwork, he shared his own story about his father, who'd been pushed into a nursing home by impatient children. He died within 6 months, he told me. Not from illness, but from heartbreak. "You're doing the right thing, Margaret." Even Patricia, Jennifer's mother, called one day. "Margaret, I'm ashamed of how they're treating you," she said. "I've tried talking to them, but they won't listen. You deserve better." These unexpected allies gave me strength to continue with my plans. The transformation in my relationship with the Ramirez family was gradual, but profound. What started as neighborly kindness had evolved into something deeper. Maria began inviting me to family dinners, and I found myself at their table more often than my own. Their extended family welcomed me without question. Carlos's mother, visiting from Mexico, taught me to make authentic tamales while sharing stories about raising children who honor their parents. One evening in September, Carlos approached me with an unusual request. "Mrs. Thompson," he began formally, which made me nervous because he usually called me Margaret. "My family and I have been talking. We know you're dealing with difficulties with Michael. We want you to know that we consider you family. You've been like a grandmother to our children, a mother to Maria and me. We want to make sure you're never alone." Maria joined us, along with Sophia and Carlos Jr. "We want to be your official emergency contacts," Maria continued. "We want everyone to know that we're your family too." I broke down crying, overwhelmed by the contrast between these people who chose to care for me and the son who saw me as an inconvenience. The irony wasn't lost on me when Michael called the next week, furious. "Mom, Jennifer's mother told us you've been spending all your time with the neighbors. People are talking. It's embarrassing." I found my spine then. What's embarrassing, Michael, is having a son who calls his mother a burden. The Ramirez family has shown me more kindness in 3 years than you have in the last 5. He was silent, then said with venom, "Fine. Play grandmother to the neighbor kids, but when you need real help, don't come crying to me." I held the phone after he hung up, mourning not the man he'd become but the boy he'd been. Meanwhile, my chosen family continued to show up. When I had the flu, Maria made soup and Carlos picked up my prescriptions. When I couldn't figure out my new phone, Carlos Jr. patiently taught me. When I felt sad on George's birthday, Sophia sat with me looking through photo albums. They weren't just neighbors anymore. They were the family I'd always deserved. Everything came to a head the following March, exactly 1 year after Michael had called me a burden. I had spent months working with Mr. Patterson to ensure everything was legal and ironclad. The house would go to the Ramirez family, along with a small education fund I'd set aside for the children. I'd updated my will, my medical directives, everything. I'd even written letters explaining my decision, though I doubted Michael would understand. I chose a Thursday morning to sign the final papers, with Helen and Mr. Patterson as witnesses. That afternoon, I invited the Ramirez family over and told them my decision. The shock on their faces quickly gave way to protests. "We can't accept this," Carlos said immediately. "It's too much." But I was firm. "You've given me something worth more than any house. You've given me love, respect, and dignity. This house should go to a family who understands its true value, not someone who sees it as a quick profit." It took hours of conversation, tears, and finally Sophia saying, "Please, Dad, she wants us to have it," before they accepted. We agreed they would move in gradually, that I would keep my rooms as long as I wanted, that this would be a true multi-generational home. The relief I felt was indescribable. My home would remain a place of love, not be sold to the highest bidder. I called Michael that evening. "I've made some decisions about the house," I said calmly. "You should know that I've legally transferred ownership to the Ramirez family." The silence was deafening. Then the explosion. Threats of lawsuits, accusations of mental incompetence, every guilt trip in the book. I let him rant, then said simply, "You made it clear the only value I had was this house. So I've given it to people who value me." The next morning, Michael arrived to find Carlos directing movers. The son who'd wanted to push me out now had to watch as the family who'd embraced me moved in instead. Mr. Patterson had done his work well. There was nothing Michael could do. It's been 6 months now since that dramatic morning. The house on Elm Street is fuller than it's been since George passed, full of laughter, cooking smells, and life. I still have my rooms, my garden, my memories, but now I also have a family who actually wants me here. Sophia practices her speeches in the living room, where Michael once did homework. Carlos Jr. fixed the creaky step Michael always ignored. Maria and I cook together daily. Carlos maintains the house with the care of someone who understands they've received a precious gift. Michael hasn't spoken to me since that day. Patricia tells me he and Jennifer are bitter, but the neighborhood knows the truth. They saw who showed up during the ice storm, who drove me to appointments, who celebrated my 69th birthday with a party that filled the backyard. It wasn't the son who lived 20 minutes away. It was the family who chose to love me. Helen often says I did the bravest thing she's ever seen. "You refuse to let someone else define your worth," she tells me. "You recognize that love isn't obligation, it's choice." She's right. I spent too many years accepting crumbs from someone who should have given me a feast, while ignoring the banquet being offered by those who owed me nothing. If you're watching this and you're in a similar situation, whether you're the parent being pushed aside or the neighbor watching it happen, know this: you are not a burden. Your worth isn't determined by what others can gain from you. It's determined by the love you've shown and the lives you've touched. Family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up when you need them. I gave away my house, but I gained so much more. I gained a son in Carlos, a daughter in Maria, grandchildren in Sophia and Carlos Jr. I gained proof that love given freely returns tenfold. And most importantly, I gained peace knowing my home remains a place of love. So tell me, have you ever had to redefine what family means? Share your stories below. Like this video if it touched your heart, and remember, you're never too old to stand up for yourself, never too late to recognize your worth, and never a burden to those who truly love you.